Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy is easily one of my favorites in the entire superhero genre, the first film turning 20 years old this year. Talking about Spider-Man is one of my largest requests, and so I thought there was absolutely no time like the present to just dive in and talk about this classic trilogy, starting with the first one, Spider-Man from 2002. And to understand Spider-Man, we need to travel back in time and understand the context it was released in. In the late 90s, the Batman film franchise, which was the most popular going into that decade, completely flamed out thanks to the abysmal critical and audience response to the film Batman and Robin, a movie that went way over the top in its tone and style. That sort of camp just wasn't resonating with the audience, so that was the end of the Batman franchise for a bit as the most popular superhero movies. Then, in comes Marvel to really change the landscape of the superhero film. First with the successful Blade movie in 1998, but even more so with the release of X-Men in the year 2000, the aim being to take it as seriously as possible, and avoiding the stigma of Batman and Robin.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
X-Men's success kicked off the superhero boom of the 2000s. The biggest franchise to emerge from that in the early 2000s was Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, and Kirsten Dunst. Spider-Man 1 simply set out to tell the origin of the character, much like the first Superman film in the 70s. Since the film is so iconic, you probably know how it plays out. I don't need to do an in-depth breakdown of the plot here, but like I did for Superman, I'll establish the basics anyway. It's the story of Peter Parker, a high school senior that lives with his Uncle Ben and Aunt May, who's at the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy in school. Even geeks don't want to sit next to him on the bus. His only friend is Harry Osborn, whose father, Norman Osborn, runs a big tech company called Oscorp. Peter and Harry both crushing on a girl named Mary Jane Watson. The film opening on a field trip where Peter gets bitten by a spider that gives him superhuman strength and reflexes, the ability to crawl walls, and shoot webs out of his hands. Peter misuses his powers in an attempt to win money, and his selfishness causes the murder of his Uncle Ben, learning that with great power comes great responsibility, as Peter then becomes the masked hero of Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Norman Osborn tests an experimental super serum on himself that turns him into the deranged villain, the Green Goblin, while Peter has to deal with his feelings for MJ, finding work, and fighting the Goblin as Spider-Man. Like I said, I tried to keep that rundown brief, so let's get into it. The first thing that naturally comes to anyone's mind when creating the first live-action interpretation of a superhero is the basic question: what's it going to look like? More specifically, how are we going to pull it off? The timing was finally right to do a movie like Spider-Man in the early 2000s. If you look into the history of it, plans to make a Spider-Man movie go back as far as the 80s. However, like producer Avi Arad said, the technology was finally ready to make this movie look convincing. The 70s and early 80s was a world where making Superman fly was a technical achievement. But Spider-Man is much more complicated because he swings from building to building doing different flips and all that. Making those kinds of physics look real takes a balance of good green screen and also CGI that won't look dated in a year. Now, that's not to say shots of this film don't look dated in 2022, because plenty certainly do, with characters looking weightless or like they don't belong in the shot. However, my point is that in 2002, they finally had the tech to make the main gimmick of Spider-Man, swinging around the city, look really good. I think what keeps Spider-Man from feeling like a dated CG mess is how Sam Raimi went about directing it. He tries to keep it as real as possible, even in the action scenes. For example, during bits requiring CGI, he cuts to shots of the characters that are real to keep you in the movie. Full-on action sequences are done with the actors, like this part or this one. You feel the impact of scenes because of the destructible set design. They actually made a hydraulic balcony that would tip over for this scene, had real smoke and real fire here. They actually made this wall come down in the climax. This glass actually shattered, the guy the Goblin tossed really crashed into that table. This is a real fight scene. Willem Dafoe did his own stunts. He even learned how to look natural while on top of the glider. They hired an entomologist to help them find the right spider for the movie, learning to control its movements to get the shots they needed, also helping them study different kinds of webs to base Spider-Man's webs off of. The movie feels real because in most respects, it was. This gives the film the ability to age much better than contemporary movies that relied more heavily on CGI that would soon become dated. This is why I love behind-the-scenes material. It really gives you a respect for the work put into these movies, and it's pretty cool to see how the real effects and shots of the actors mix with computer-generated images, and see how green screen added scale and depth to scenes taking place on a set. Helping it feel real is the fact that it takes place in the midst of New York City. Raimi had said that he didn't want to create a comic book world for this movie like Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher's Batman films had done. The story was best served by utilizing the real New York City. He explained,
In order to make the story reverberate with the audience, I didn't feel that it was proper to have a super stylized world like the comic book world you see in a lot of film translations of comics. This made it difficult stylistically, because if you place this fantastic, colorful character in the normal setting of New York, it's just too jarring. So we took the edge off reality. There are parts of New York which are magical, so we created a whole city out of those realistic, magical parts of New York. Most every building actually exists in Manhattan, but we shot them at magic hour, or added a little extra something to their design or architecture, or the way the light hits them in order to transform the environment.
With considered set design, film locations, and even shooting times, they allow the environment to become part of the story, using the sets to tell a story, like how this cage match setting was designed to be claustrophobic, so you'd feel the antagonism Peter feels both in and out of the cage. Peter's bedroom is covered in science stuff and artwork, telling us without words what kind of kid he was. Norman Osborn's walls are covered in green with a plethora of weird-looking masks, showing that he was already kinda weird before the serum. But of course, the film isn't just held together by quality set design. The movie brings the characters to life with detailed costume design. Spider-Man himself has the same basic silhouette and design he's had for decades at that point, which was the goal. The look of Spider-Man was iconic and simple, so why fix what's not broken? For the Green Goblin, I have to give them some credit here. His design is one that's not easily translated into live action. Having a character wear a mask that has a movable piece just doesn't work because such a thing doesn't exist. In the movie, you have an overall goofy appearance, mostly because of the mask where you can see his mouth moving from inside the teeth part of the mask. But all in all, I think they picked a design that works, it's just that the face looks kinda goofy. But we have been spending the last several minutes of the video on the production side of things. But the movie isn't just about the spectacle. After all, Batman and Robin had spectacle but was limited in substance, part of why it bombed. Spider-Man 1 is a timeless movie because of how heartfelt the story is. This wasn't trying to maintain a super serious tone, or the opposite, it was telling a simple story that works so well because of the relationships between its characters. The movie puts a lot of work into humanizing its cast. Uncle Ben, for example, doesn't get that much screen time in this, but with what he's given, he's characterized as a hardworking man who loves his family and has had to raise Peter, and when he says this,
"And I know I'm not your father."
Then stop pretending to be.
you can see he's hurt by that. Adds a lot of emotion to his death scene just a few minutes later. Harry Osborn's a character you can tell a lot about just by the dialogue he's given. It looks like he's rebelling against Norman in his first scene with him.
What, you want me to trade in my car for a Jetta just because you flunked out of every private school I ever sent you to?
It wasn't for me.
But you can tell how hard he tries to win Norman's favor without being a genius. For example, he gets upset at Mary Jane for wearing red because his dad prefers black. Or how his behavior is affected by the opulence of his upbringing.
I want to buy you something. Because I want to. It'll make you feel better.
Mary Jane is shown to have a difficult home life that she hides in all other parts of her life, as she's also vying for approval, even wearing black when she first meets Norman because of what Harry said earlier, but gradually comes to realize that Peter is the only person who ever cared about her or her actual ambitions in life.
I want to act.
Really? Well, that's perfect.
Even the minor characters are well characterized in this, like J. Jonah Jameson, the editor-in-chief at the Daily Bugle who hates Spider-Man, expertly played by J.K. Simmons. He might honestly be the funniest character in the movie.
Move Conway to page 7.
There's a problem with page 7.
I make it page 8 and give him 10% off. I make it 5%.
That can't be done.
Get out of here!
And while you might think he's a jerk when watching it, even he has humanizing elements, as seen in this moment here.
Who's the photographer who takes the pictures of Spider-Man?
I don't know who he is. His stuff comes in the mail.
You're lying!
I swear.
All in all, this is also a really funny movie. It's not a comedy, but it's funny in a really dry and quick manner. It doesn't linger on jokes and has an insanely memorable script.
Now he's gonna get away with my money.
I missed the part where that's my problem. That's slander.
It is not. I resent that. Slander is spoken. In print, it's libel.
Are you in or are you out?
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
Peter! Sorry I'm late. It's a jungle out there. I had to beat an old lady with a stick to get these cranberries.
And it also uses fast cuts to make you laugh at unexpected moments via extreme close-ups, even when the main villain's about to die.
Oh.
The director just has a lot of style, and it comes through in the movie. My overall point being that this is a very well-balanced movie, and that's because of the characters. The dynamics of the characters are used to great effect during one of the movie's best scenes, the Thanksgiving dinner at Peter and Harry's apartment. This is coming right after a fight between Spider-Man and the Goblin, as Norman gets the suspicion that Peter's Spider-Man in a moment dripping with tension. Quite literally. then getting even more so when he actually learns Peter's Spider-Man.
How did you say that happened?
Bike messenger.
Willem Dafoe does a fantastic job making Norman really creepy and sinister in moments like this, and a downright sociopath as well. Even switching between personalities on the fly in other scenes.
You killed them.
We killed them.
He really is a compelling villain in this, also being really entertaining one with how hammy he is as the Goblin. The film gives us contrasting character arcs for both Peter and Norman. Peter learning the meaning of choice and responsibility through his own experiences, which makes him a hero, while Norman descends into villainy because of the fact that he doesn't accept the responsibility for what he does, starting with trying to lie to the military at the very beginning of the movie in order to keep his defense contract. When the Goblin tells Spider-Man this,
"In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you."
He does believe that. He does believe himself wronged by a society of people beneath him. It's the Goblin's serum that allows him to act on those thoughts. Point being that I think the movie has a great dichotomy between its hero and villain. But the whole movie was riding on Tobey Maguire's portrayal of Peter Parker, and thankfully I think he did a fantastic job. Spider-Man's such a unique superhero, especially for the age he was created in, the 1960s. The idea is, he's a superhero, but he's one of us. He didn't land on Earth from another planet or inherit $1 billion. He has these superpowers, but still has to get his homework done, still has to get home on time, can't get the girl of his dreams, misuses the power, and has to pay the price to learn responsibility. All things the average comic reader might relate to in some form or fashion, and that just wasn't the norm of the mainstream superheroes at the time. Now, whether or not you buy into Tobey being a high school senior/college freshman is a matter of opinion, I suppose, but for me, that's not even the important part. He's just so sincere throughout the whole movie. From his immature snap at Uncle Ben, his arrogantly letting the crook go, the despair from Uncle Ben being gone, his trying to defend Spider-Man from Jameson, his being there for the people he cares about. He just feels like a real person to me. So by the end, when he says this,
I have a father. His name was Ben Parker.
It's earned because he's grown so much in the course of the movie. For Sam Raimi, this relatability, this coming-of-age story is the most important part of Spider-Man for him, and it is for so many Spider-Man fans as well. That's the only reason Tobey Maguire even took the job. He said that he wanted to do the movie as long as there was real heart and substance behind it, not just like a special effects show. Forgetting all the superpowers and supervillainy of it all, Spider-Man is an earnest story about responsibility, about growing up. Made especially clear in the ending. Through everything that's happened, Peter learns a really important thing about his being Spider-Man.
The ones I love will always be the ones who pay.
He has to lead this double life to keep the people he cares about safe. He's not going to tell Harry about his father being the Goblin because he asked him not to in his dying moments. Peter's just going to have to live with Harry thinking Spider-Man murdered his father. And the biggest of all, Peter decides not to be with Mary Jane when he finally has the ability to do so. This was a really important part of the movie to get right. Raimi had said that many actresses auditioned to be Mary Jane, but for him, the deciding factor had to be that she had a chemistry with Tobey Maguire. He wanted you, in the audience, to feel like they should be together, making Peter's awkwardness in the first half of the movie extra hard to watch because they could be so great for each other, but he just won't say anything. But back to the ending, that's part of the tragic element of Spider-Man. He's wanted to be with MJ for his whole life, and now he can, but chooses not to because it's safer that way. The lesson he learned seeing the people he cared about put in peril because of Spider-Man in this movie. It's so great. You feel bad that Peter has to sacrifice so much of his personal life to be Spider-Man, but he does it because with great power comes great responsibility. So he'll continue donning the costume and saving the day because it's right. Danny Elfman's score capturing this to a T as his motif for Spider-Man having both epic, bombastic bits, capturing the superhero fun side of Spider-Man, but also more somber bits, the true essence of Peter as a character, which also plays in the film's quieter or sad moments, helping the scenes resonate with the audience. Through a mix of all these things, the characters, the story, the effects, the music, the film is able to end on a triumphant note with one final swinging scene. One where every time you reach that part of the movie, you stop and think, wow, that was a great movie. That's how the masses felt about this film in 2002, with this being the highest grossing film of the year. And that's also how I feel every time I watch this movie, even 20 years later in 2022. Now, I never saw this in theaters. I was too young when this came out. I was only born in 2000. Although, on that note, I really hope this movie gets some kind of theatrical rerun when it actually turns 20 years old this spring. I'd be all over that. But as I was saying, the movie means a lot to me, having been my introduction to the Spider-Man mythos, having watched the crap out of it via TV reruns and the DVD release. This trilogy, like many people my age, is the definitive Spider-Man, or at least was the bedrock of their Spider-Man fandom. If you're involved with internet discourse, you'd know that Spider-Man is one of the most tribal fandoms in all of fandoms. largely centering around which of the 3 live-action Spider-Man portrayals is the best. I figured I'd weigh in on this issue because, like I said, Spider-Man is a very tribal fan base. I simply love Spider-Man. Every incarnation that I have enjoyed carries that same DNA that I talked about with this movie. Spider-Man being a character that tries to do the right thing always, but still is met with tragedy and loss throughout his life, however he chooses to do the right thing anyway. That's what Spider-Man means to me and so many other people. I just think he's a great character at his core. So therefore, you won't catch me being caught up in trying to prove which Spider-Man is the true, most definitive, or most accurate to the comics, because Spider-Man is just a great character and a great mythos. Some incarnations are better than others, and some might be more to your taste than others, but I think my point still stands, highlighting why I've been able to enjoy Spider-Man in all his various mediums I've seen him in. So, is this one the most accurate to the comics? Frankly, I have no idea. I don't read comics, so I don't care. I saw a heartfelt movie that was made by talented people who cared a lot about the project, one that has all the elements I enjoy in other Spider-Man stories, and for that, I look at this movie as an absolute win. You can feel while watching the movie and the behind the scenes, and hopefully while watching this video, that this wasn't a work-for-hire project for Sam Raimi. He loved Spider-Man, has for almost his entire life, and carefully considered every aspect of this first film adaptation. And I tried to do justice to that fact throughout this script. Admittedly, this wasn't an easy script to write because so many great video essays have been done on Spider-Man 1 and all the Spider-Man movies that I wondered, what could I really bring to the table? I suppose that's for the audience to decide, but all I know is that I loved the movie and wanted to talk about it. And will continue to do so as my next video is going to cover one of my favorite movies of all time, Spider-Man 2. So I hope you look forward to that, and I hope you enjoyed this video as well. In the meantime, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.